Week 1 of the NFL DFS slate was like a movie. It was pure cinema, and we were here with the earliest look that you can get at that DFS slate. Well, guess what? We're back. This is week 2 of the DFS Early Look. Let's lock it in.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
With so many great plays on the slate from this last week, we have to believe that we are once again on track for a huge money-making week here in week 2. This is the DFS Early Look. That's Jake Tribbey. I'm Thomas Tipple. Let's get right into it. With so much action at quarterback, it felt like there were a couple of superhuman performances. This is one of them, possibly the most spectacular throw I've ever seen made. It was phenomenal. Let's talk about your top QB from the DFS Early Look article right now.
Yeah, that would be Anthony Richardson. He's 6,800 this week on DraftKings. That clocks in as the QB3. So he did see a bit of a price jump, but it just isn't quite enough. He posted the lowest adjusted completion percentage of the week. He actually completed 4 fewer passes than the next closest week 1 starter. That's just 9 completions total. And despite missing A.D. Mitchell on 2 different touchdown throws during that game, Anthony Richardson still managed to finish as the QB4 on the week, scoring 26.1 fantasy points. AR is so good that a borderline league worst passing performance, especially if you discount that one rocket throw that you mentioned, still led to him being a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I've already spent thousands of words discussing how we want to play Anthony Richardson in DFS until he's at a comparable price tag to Lamar Jackson, and Richardson is $900 cheaper on DraftKings this week. And the game environment, while it doesn't project for fireworks, Richardson is one of the best fantasy scorers we've ever seen at quarterback, and he's still too cheap. So, in a game against Green Bay where we do expect Jordan Love to sit, some people might want to lay off, but I'm always clicking a guy who's a generational athlete at the position when he should be the same price as Lamar Jackson, and he just isn't.
Right, and just because Anthony Richardson struggled to throw the ball does not mean you plug in Malik Willis in week 2, because he's also going to struggle to throw the ball. He's just not that same athlete. Don't galaxy brain. Read the DFS Early Look article to make sure that you're locked into the right players. Let's talk about running back. One of these, well, really both of these offenses were not super sexy, but these guys just continue to have the opportunity to get it done. Let's talk running backs.
Yeah, we've got a couple discounted, grosser bets on volume, but I think they both have merit this week. The first one being Jerome Ford. He's 5,900 on DraftKings. That's RB17. Even a better deal on FanDuel where he's 6,300, priced as the RB22. After week 1, Ford ranked 7th in snap share, 10th in carry share, 9th in target share, and 3rd in expected fantasy points among running backs. Sure, this Browns offense might be a disaster, but every running back who earned at least 70% of his team's snaps last year averaged over 15.5 expected fantasy points per game. That would have matched Travis Etienne as the RB10 in terms of usage, which means Ford's floor is roughly a low-end RB1. That's secure for as long as he can maintain this level of playing time. We know Nick Chubb won't be back anytime soon. That cements Ford as one of the best values of the week 2 main slate at running back in a game where he will probably get peppered with targets, with Cleveland being listed as a 3.5 point underdog to Jacksonville. And if they play anything like they did last week, a lot of targets are coming for Jerome Ford.
Right, and there's always another. Obviously, the running back position is probably the most discussed position on these slates, in my opinion, because really we all know that hitting at the high end at running back is what makes the difference 9 times out of 10, at least in my experience. Let's talk about another running back whose offense looked absolutely sluggish, but again, volume is king.
Exactly. Volume is king at the running back position, and Najee Harris was one of those volume kings in week 1. He's 5,500 on DraftKings this week. That clocks in at RB 27. He earned 22 opportunities on Sunday compared to just 4 from Jaylen Warren. Remember that last year, Harris only exceeded 20 opportunities in 12% of his total games. We know Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, and Najee Harris looks like his workhorse. Now, we may not care about Harris as a workhorse in a gross offense most weeks, given the risks of offensive ineptitude or game flow rendering the rushing attack unusable. But week 2 isn't most weeks. Pittsburgh is actually favored by 3 points against a Denver defense that just gave up the 4th most fantasy points and 8th most rushing yards to opposing running backs in week 1. This is a near perfect setup for Najee Harris, who is $400 cheaper than the next closest running back to earn at least 16 touches in week 1. Harris is pretty clearly your cheapest bet on volume this week, and I do like betting on volume when the team in question is favored, like the Steelers are.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. They're just going to run the ball. Obviously, Denver's offense didn't look good, which means more time on offense for Arthur Smith to work his, I guess, fake wizardry and magic, because Artie's back, baby, and we love him for that. Obviously, the fun plays are wide receivers. I think you have a couple here that are phenomenal. Let's dive into wide receiver.
Yeah, we got some of the gross names out of the way at running back, but there are some really exciting wide receiver options, even on the expensive end, who are great values. And that starts with Cooper Kupp, who's 7,600 on DraftKings. That's the wide receiver 5 this week. Puka Nacua is on injured reserve, and that leaves Cooper Kupp as the clear wide receiver 1 in last year's 3rd most productive fantasy offense for wide receivers. On Sunday night, Nacua left early due to injury, and Cooper Kupp earned a truly absurd 58% first read target share and 21 total targets. Now, there were only 8 instances of a player exceeding a 58% first read target share last season, and 21 targets is the 11th most in a single game in NFL history. Sure, that usage isn't sustainable, but it does help emphasize that Kupp's role without Nacua is as good as any wide receiver in the NFL. This week, Kupp gets an Arizona defense that ranked as the single worst defense in Mike Clay's preseason projections, and they just gave up the 10th most receiving yards in week 1. I view Kupp as an awesome play at this price point for as long as Puka Nacua is off the field.
He really dialed the clock back. That was a phenomenal performance, truly. And all signs point to more. Terribly underpriced at this point. This is a smash pick. Let's go wide receiver number 2.
Yeah, that would be Rashee Rice. He's only 6,700 on DraftKings this week. That's wide receiver 12. Even a cheaper on FanDuel, 6,900. That's wide receiver 14. He looked great in week 1. He had the 5th highest first read target share of any player, and he recorded the 2nd most yards after the catch, behind only Tyreek Hill. Rice is going to be one of the most dominant fantasy assets in the NFL if he continues to monopolize these first read looks in Kansas City. He averaged 18.9 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his final 4 regular season games last year when he led Kansas City in first read target share. Now, 18.9 DraftKings fantasy points per game would have ranked 5th best among main slate eligible wide receivers last season, yet Rashee Rice is priced as this slate's wide receiver 12 on DraftKings. And the game environment is the cherry on top here. This game offers the 3rd highest total of the main slate, and even after Cincinnati's brutal offensive outing last week, we know they're one of the few teams that can push Kansas City to a ceiling fantasy performance. Rice is going to remain a screaming DFS value until he's at least 7,800 on DraftKings.
Yeah, he's so clearly the Chiefs wide receiver 1. A lot of love for Xavier Worthy, but we can't expect an end around and a defensive back to completely forget to cover him every week. If we did, all of my DFS lineups and fantasy lineups would look really, really good every week. The wide receiver 1s at these prices, insane. It won't last. Take early advantage with the DFS early look. One more position to go. We wanted to say Kyle Pitts every week. Now I'm already saddened it's week 2, but I think we have the next big, probably every week play here on DFS early look at tight end. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, as much as I wanted to say Kyle Pitts, unfortunately, Atlanta is off the main slate, which leaves us with Colby Parkinson as one of my favorite early tight ends of week 2. He's only 3,100 on DraftKings. That's tight end 27, about as cheap on FanDuel at 4,800. That's tight end 26. Parkinson led all week 1 tight ends in route participation, and he ranked top 16 in expected fantasy points in his debut game for the Rams. Now, chasing a 5-target performance isn't exactly ideal, but Parkinson's rock bottom tight end 27 price tag more than makes up for any volume concerns. With Puka Nacua out, as I mentioned previously, we are going to want to target basically every Rams pass catcher in a full-time role, and Parkinson is no exception. The matchup here with Arizona is pretty encouraging. Arizona was the single softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing tight ends after week 12 last year, and preseason defensive rankings don't suggest significant improvement. Beyond that, the main reason we want to play a guy like Parkinson is for the salary savings he enables. The expensive tight ends are off to a poor start this season for fantasy football purposes. I'm not sure the high tier of tight end has the same juice it once did, and Parkinson allows us to spend up more at significantly more exciting positions, especially in wide receiver this week, but there's some juice at running back as well.
Right. And let's not forget that Matthew Stafford made Tyler Higbee an absolute superstar in both DFS and regular fantasy. This man is not afraid to go to a tight end when you need it. Jake Tribbey with DFS Early Look. The article, go check that out, FantasyPoints.com. You can find him and all of his phenomenal social media gaming at Jake Tribbey. You can find me at L Nostradamus, and you can find us back here next week for the earliest look at the DFS slate with the DFS Early Look. See you guys next week.